Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show, Week 16 Sunday Night Recap Edition. I am your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to break down all the football fallouts, action, whatever you want to call it, with my friend and the one, the only, Dwain, The Rock McFarland. And Dwain, sounds like you had a pretty good Sunday, my friend.
Good Sunday, man. I think I'm going to win all four of the big matchups. We have some other teams that are doing like the kind of 3-week race thing, so I haven't looked at those as much yet. But, the must-win games, Hartitz, I do think I'm going to advance. One of them's like a 60-40. I do think that it will be myself and Friedman in the Fantasy Life Creators Guillotine League. I'll say Thor has like a 1% life. He's got CeeDee Lamb, but I think he's down by like 30, and Friedman has Josh Jacobs. He's down to me by 60. See, that's what happens, Thor. You can't trash talk so much all the time, man. If you do, like I'm just telling you, it comes back to get you. I just speak from experience, to be honest. I actually love that Thor does the trash talking, and he has a really good team, but looks like it'll be me and Friedman in the finals there.
About to say, man, you can't be shooting down trash talkers. We always say this when guys like Cam Taylor-Britt start talking smack. It's so easy to come back to them, but it's more fun when they're yelling it out, even if, I'm with you. Karma gods generally do come for those talking all that ish. So we'll watch the film and get better as always, but certainly watch plenty of football over these past 2 days. And let's start off, Dwayne, with, the biggest action of the week, and that was the Ohio State Buckeyes taking down the Tennessee Volunteers. All right, just had to get that off my chest. Let's go through some of the Saturday action first. But the Chiefs took down the Texans 27-19. KC covered as 3.5-point faves. The over cashed here at 42.5. So turns out, Dwayne, even if Patrick Mahomes' ankle is indeed injured, I am not doubting that. He is still superhuman, can still move just fine for the most part. I mean, he had 33 rushing yards, even scored a 15-yard touchdown early. Also threw for 260 and 1 touchdown, but honestly could have had a couple more. Justin Watson dropped a 31-yard score. Xavier Worthy's sheesh mixtape got even longer. He only had 1 foot down on a potential 24-yard touchdown and then cut in front of Travis Kelce and dropped what also could have been another 12-yard score. So again, just Chiefs continuing to get away with it. Another 1-score victory. But I thought the biggest takeaway here was just, Patrick Mahomes looking good, which is really good news for, Hollywood Brown is back in action.
Yeah, I was listening to the first half of that one on the radio. Myself and the family, we were headed down to Houston for some Christmas activities on a Saturday. Then we drove back and we were back here today. So I didn't get to see it, but I was listening to Mahomes running around. I was like, yeah, sounds pretty healthy. I heard the touchdown run. The big takeaways I had here for the Chiefs, you just mentioned it, like Mahomes still doing Mahomes things, so it's fine. Not what we wanted in fantasy this year, but it's been good enough here to keep winning games in real life NFL. 2 things though for the Chiefs, if you're thinking about like actionable stuff heading into next weekend. Number one, we still have a committee backfield. It was actually Kareem Hunt leading the way this weekend with 15.9 fantasy points, 46% of the snaps. So it's not like he was dominating. There was still Checo involved, but Checo was behind him though with 33% of the snaps, only gave you 3.5 PPR points. So I just really want to stay away from this backfield. I don't think it's predictable. The offense is not really good enough right now, in my opinion, to say, well, fine, I'll just ride, either one and I'll deal with it if I take a bad score. Because the problem is, like, we're not getting the 30, 35 point blow-ups. Like, you can do that with like a Bucky Irving and a Rachaad White because the ceiling is so high. But I think it's tougher with this duo. And right now, it doesn't look like they're ready to commit to either one of them. Samaje Perine also was still involved. The other 2 big things here are in the passing game. Number one, you mentioned Worthy. Like, he's trying to finish the year strong. So I didn't get to see some of those plays. It sounds like, Worthy still thinks he's playing college football. So maybe it takes him an extra year to acclimate and learn how to get the 2 feet down thing and, just how to manage the boundary better, period. Like, the guy's mismanaged the boundary many times this season. And honestly, he's kind of left Mahomes without a lot of options on how he's going to get him the ball. But last 2 games, man, 19.6, 20.5 PPR points. 29% and 27% target share. So it is a step in the right direction for him to finish the season. Obviously, we're going to get to see him in the playoffs as well. So we'll see if he can keep it up. But the big thing, Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown had a 33% route participation, but man, was he heavily targeted. Had a 53% targets per route run whenever he was out there.
Nice.
So only 9.5 fantasy points, but I thought the targets were really encouraging, Ian. And when you've mentioned it, like, really, do we have to keep Justin Watson out here? We got Juju Smith-Schuster still out here getting a 30% route participation rate. I think we'll see Hollywood increase his role. It is hard to say, though, like, what it's going to get to. Like, will it suddenly be at 80 or 90%? I think it's really tough because we've seen this now for 3 or 4 years from the Andy Reid offense. Really, the only like ascending player we've seen that actually was able to slowly rise through that and overcome it was Rashee Rice. Really, all the other guys like have been okay. It didn't work. Now Xavier Worthy, they gave him the role right away. He struggled with it. So I will say this though, like Hollywood Brown, I got to see him in that second half. Didn't play quite as much, but man, like I thought he looked pretty good. I mean, he's obviously got a little bit of rust, so we'll see what happens. But I would say boom bust wide receiver 4 would be the territory I would have him in heading into next week in the ranks if I had to call it right now.
Made you wonder, what Mahomes maybe could have done this year if he did have all 3 of his top receivers healthy throughout the duration of the season. So I know Mahomes hasn't exactly been living up to that best quarterback alive label week in and week out. Plenty of those sheeshes too worthy, especially downfield, have been on number 15 himself. But yeah, at the end of the day, Chiefs are doing what the Chiefs do, and that is rip off win after win. Now 14-1, they will be facing off the Steelers in Pittsburgh here, Christmas Day action on Wednesday. So get your popcorn ready for that one. Otherwise, with the Texans, Dwain, really, good performance from CJ Stroud relative to what we've seen, other weeks of the year, 244 and 2 touchdowns through the air. They had the 2 picks, but sadly, really everything that happened in Houston comes down to Tank Dell suffering another season-ending injury. Presumably, man, he's dealing with a dislocated kneecap. They're doing more tests and stuff, but I can only imagine that, yeah, he's not going to be coming back anytime soon. So just sucks for a guy who obviously broke his leg last year and then got shot in the offseason. And just when he starts to really go off, like we talked coming into this game about him looking more explosive in recent weeks, catches that touchdown, and then again has the injury. So 98 yards in a score before, so at least he got to go out on top of that. But man, Dwain, really at this point, it's Nico Collins and everyone else.
Yeah, Nico Collins and everyone else. But I do think that this leads to Dalton Schultz. I know you don't want to hear it. You are the notorious Schultz hater. I mean, if you are the captain of the Cordero Patterson fan club, right? If you're the leader of that, like, what does that make you to Dalton Schultz? Like, of the anti-Dalton Schultz fan club? He had 15.5 PPR points, 84% route participation, so out there full-time role, 22% target share. I do think he's the number 2 target in this passing game now with Nico Collins out. So I think that puts him squarely in that low-end tight end 1 territory. We're not going to stamp him as a mid-range or high-end tight end 1 right now, but he's definitely, in the top 12 moving forward for me.
I mean, maybe he could even get up to 70 yards or 6 catches in the game. I don't want to get crazy, Dwain, but just saying there is the opportunity.
Just calm down.
So he did score a nice touchdown. I would argue it was more so due to Stroud scrambling around and making a nice play. But hey, all the fantasy points count the same regardless. So otherwise, just another dud for a running back against the Chiefs. Only 71 scoreless yards for Joe Mixon. I had him in plenty of lineups, so I understand it hurt you guys. But guess what? Next week, going to be facing the Ravens on Wednesday, which, as I say that out loud, Dwain, I realize is another tough matchup. So going to have to be dealing with that one. Just realize it's still hard to drop guys like Mixon too far down the ranks because only so many running backs looking at 15 to 20 touches in an offense like the Texans where we can actually fathom them putting up some points, even though I admit it hasn't been as frequent as we would have wished this season. So I think we can go ahead and move on to that Ravens game that happened on Saturday late afternoon when they took down the Steelers 34-17. Baltimore did cover as 7-point faves. The overcast here at 44.5. So another 3 touchdowns for Lamar Jackson, Dwain, 1 each to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, and Rashad Bateman. But really the star of the show, Derrick Henry, going for $162 on the ground. Just unfortunately couldn't put together the truly gargantuan performance because it has now been 35 days and counting since he last scored a rushing touchdown. I did want to ask though, because we had Justice Hill depart this one early with a concussion, and he was not listed as a participant in their estimated practice report. Did Henry's actual route rate get up after Hill departed?
Yeah, I did. 52% route participation. He's typically been around 30% now. We didn't have Keaton Mitchell active for this game, so Mitchell could be the guy to come in and take more of that Justice Hill role. If Hill is to miss time next week, we could see that passing down stuff maybe get split up. But they had Rasheen Ali available. He didn't really take any of that workload. He took a few carries that were left behind by Justice Hill, but yeah, it was more Derrick Henry in the passing game.
Otherwise, shout out Zay Flowers, getting to the century mark, 5 catches, 100 yards, 0 touchdowns, but 8 targets. Is dealing with a shoulder injury, listed as a DMP. I'm not thinking it's too serious, but again, will be something we need to keep especially close track of with the short week coming up as they are again facing off in Houston next Wednesday. Over with the Steelers, now another week without George Pickens. That said, Mike Tomlin told us actually today that there's a real chance, quote, that Pickens is able to play through that hamstring injury and suit up against the Chiefs here on Wednesday. So otherwise, was a nice game from Calvin Austin, 65 yards on 5 targets. Russell Wilson threw a touchdown to Michael Pruitt. Thank you on behalf of the entire fantasy community for that, Mr. Arthur Smith. But also, Dwain, I mean, the real story here is our one true king, Cordero Patterson, coming down with a score early in the end zone. So cool little 12-yard touchdown catch there, and I will stop with that. For real, though, Jaylen Warren, 17 touches, 92 yards. Just more of a game script than Dwain, or do we actually see this moving away from Najee?
No, it's and we talked about it though last weekend, and we talked about it a little bit the week before. Najee really has become more of a game script dependent back, to your point. So it's the latter of what you were just talking about, because we've got Jaylen Warren as well as Cordero Patterson involved in this backfield. Only a 22% route participation. That's a number. You know, he's been below 30% multiple times now. So before Najee, yeah, even though like the majority of his role was still early downs, he played enough on passing downs and he got targeted enough, at least on early downs, but that stuff's just not happening. A 4% target share in this game, only 4.2 PPR points, 28% of the snaps. So really game scripted out of this one. Like, so this is the floor kind of game that you can get with Najee. And the real challenge is, Ian, I don't know what the ceiling is anymore, because we have these other two guys involved. It was Jaylen Warren leading the way, 14.2 PPR points. Again, a lot of that due to the way that the game worked out and just the matchup. The Ravens are really tough to run on. The thing that, Najee does the best is really what the Ravens defense is the best at taking away, right? Which just, those true between the tackle, just trying to grind out yards. You're not going to do that really against the Ravens defense. So 67% snap share in this game. That's huge for Jaylen Warren. He had half of the rushing attempts. Cordero Patterson, not really even out there that much, only 5% of the snaps. But he did end up with, to your point, the score that gave him 8.2 PPR points, because that's all he does is make plays once he has the ball in his hand. So I still think this is a committee that will be hard to predict week to week. But the bottom line is, man, Najee, like, I don't see the ceiling, and the floor is getting pretty gross.
I mean, going up against the Chiefs on Wednesday, Dwain, it's going to be tough to get him in the top 30. I think we have to go Warren ahead of this.
No. We called him a running back 3 this last week. This is the same problem. He's going to be a running back 3 again. The only positive thing the Steelers have working for them, it's a more manageable game script. Like, it was much more likely that the Ravens could somehow just jump out and put the Steelers, into a situation where, they're going to need to be throwing the ball more often than not. I could see this game being a little bit closer because, like we talked about earlier, Chiefs offense, not what it once was. Maybe it'll start to click, but it's not on the same level as the Ravens.
Sorry, I wanted to go back into the Ravens real quick because there was no Nelson Aguilar. I know we had to make a tough decision about our tight end in the league. Dwain, did we see Isaiah Likely get more of a full-time role?
Yeah, he was around a 60% route participation rather than, like the 50, 55 he had been, but it still wasn't like they gave him that full-time role. Rashad Bateman was sitting at an 80%. Obviously, Zay Flowers was pretty much on the field the whole time. Mark Andrews, he went down from where he was last week in a game where you don't have Nelson Aguilar, and you don't have Deontay Johnson on the team anymore. So sometimes it's tough to figure these things out, but they just kind of spread it around, like with Tylan Wallace, some of the other guys. They let them get some playing time as well. So not anything that I would say we can hang our hat on and be like, okay, great, they're going to run 12 personnel all the time now.
Otherwise, I think we can move on to some Sunday action. In the Battle of Ohio, we had the Bengals take down the Browns 24-6. Cincy covered as 8.5-point favorites. The under did cash here at 46.5. So another 250-plus yard, 3-touchdown performance for Mr. Joe Burrow. Now has 7 straight games with 3+ scores. Had shorter ones to T. Higgins and Andre Yoshivas, one of which, man, was just incredible. Literally has maybe a centimeter of air between his knee and the ground. Still got the pass off, and, been doing that all season, just climbing up the pocket when pressure has arose and continuing to make good things happen. But really, if you guys weren't watching the end of it, was either incredible for your fantasy team, or if you replaced or if you're facing Burrow and Chase, it really sucked. But 32-yard bomb to Jamar Chase, up 11 on a free play with under 2 minutes remaining. No need for it, but you know what, Dwain, as someone who did have a lot of Burrow and Chase everywhere, I certainly appreciated it. So good.
Burrow's on a mission. I think he's just like, we're done. We're not playing well, but he just wants everyone to know how good he is. Like, he's an amazing quarterback. Like, if I'm starting an NFL team right now, I'm going Patrick Mahomes number 1. I'm going Josh Allen number 2. I'm going Joe Burrow number 3. Joe Burrow. I mean, dude,
Lamar.
I'm going Joe Burrow. Dude, I just think he's so look, and it's nothing against Lamar. I like Lamar, but dude, Joe is just so clutch. He's come through in so many big games. I mean, and he really can just come out and it feels like at the drop of a hat. You need 400, like he'll just do it. And like he can do it every single game. So look, Lamar's right there as well. I love him. Jaden Daniels is an up and comer. We got other guys. It's not to try to knock any of these other guys. That's just how good Joe Burrow is. He's just really an amazing player. And I think that's just the chip that's on his shoulder right now. He's like, we suck and he hates it. So the best way he knows to take that out is just to go out there and ball out every single weekend and, make all these plays. And the other thing I'll say real quick about the Bengals, and then, man, you can take – I don't have anything after this one.
Justin Herbert, by the way, just before we move on, want to throw his name in there. I think so.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you. I'm with you. I do like Justin Herbert as well. I agree. I think Herbert is definitely he's one of the guys that's up there. We're really positioning ourselves in a nice spot. I know passing's been down, but we have a lot of good young quarterbacks to take the league over for the next 5 to 10 years. So I think the league overall is in a good spot. But the only other thing I would say with the Bengals, man, T. Higgins, like he's going to get a bag, dude. He's having a career year. He comes out here this weekend, has a 39% target share, 19.8 PPR points. Yeah, it was Jamar Chase outdoing him again, but it's Jamar Chase. And Jamar Chase, to your point, gets the touchdown catch, on a free play at the end of the game. But man, T. Higgins, dude, just, I had moments where I thought, is this guy really a wide receiver 2? Is he more of a wide receiver 3 long-term in fantasy football? As recently as last year, like watching him this year, he's just taken his game to an absolute another level. And man, he's deserving of just a monster payday. Hopefully it's with the Bengals. I'd love to see him keep this all together. But it doesn't really matter where he goes. He's a great player. He's going to be good for fantasy.
Maybe the strongest hands I've seen in the league, Dwayne. I mean, you never see the guy body catch it and he'll have it on his fingertips, take a big hit and somehow still come down with the ball. So great stuff there. You mentioned Higgins, 58 yards and a tud. Jamar Chase, 97 and a touchdown. And now per Underdog NFL, great account to follow, by the way. Jamar Chase joins 2003 Randy Moss and 2021 Cooper Kupp as the only players with 100+ catches, 1,500+ yards, and 16+ touchdowns in a season. So yeah, he is really freaking good. Hopefully he does come down with that triple crown.
One final Bengal note I have, Ian, is yesterday someone gave me a new Xbox. I haven't played in like 5 years.
Okay.
So we got back from Houston last night at like 11:30. I set it up, figured out how to sign into my to Xbox. It's been forever, like trying to figure out the password and reset everything. I'm like an old dude now. That took me like 30 minutes. But my son helped me out with it all. And so I got in practice mode. Zoe came down and I just went in with the Bengals. I just like getting in, seeing like how the new coverages work. I just run cover 4 and run a bunch of plays. Basically, I'm getting ready. I did buy the bundle, Ian. I bought Madden as well as NCAA. So we're going to have a game, but I'm going to get some practice in. Huh?
On PS5.
Can't we? Doesn't it not matter anymore? Doesn't it let you play against either one?
If someone hanging out with us live could let us know if we could cross-platform Xbox, PS5.
I don't know. Well, if we can't, oh well. But yeah, I asked you this. I thought I asked you, and you said Xbox.
No. Hopefully, one of us takes down one of these best ball attorneys here in the next 2 weeks. That doesn't matter.
One was Zoe came down, and she saw me in practice mode, and my team was the Bengals. Like, why do you do the Bengals? We like the Cowboys. I was like, cause they have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Mike Gesicki has an 85 speed. That's pretty good.
Not trying to play with Cooper Rush, trying to escape reality here for a little bit. Come on. So,
Exactly.
Okay, guys, thanks for keeping up with us there. Only other note would be, kind of disappointing from Chase Brown, 91 rushing yards, 18 receiving yards. The fact that over 100 total yards is disappointing tells you how much of a heater this young man has been on. I will note he was just short, stopped at the 1-yard line twice on the same drive. And then Joe Burrow lost a fumble on the next play. So I know it was 24-6, but really wasn't even that close. And the big reason was because of the performance of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who, yeah, man, I could have honestly seen Dwain, like him impressing because of how much crap we talked about him all week and all the bad stats we brought up. And no, I mean, you can look at it, 2 picks, took 5 sacks, only 157 yards on 34 pass attempts. And our own Paul Charchian, I think, said it best. Like, if you watched him, he was arguably even worse than all that. So yes, he can move around, had 49 rushing yards, and he actually had a rushing touchdown nullified on a hold that I do think kind of created the touchdown in the first place. But it just sucks to see, Dwayne. And maybe the Browns just want to lose and they want to get a better draft pick. By all means, go for it, because that's what they're doing when they're picking DTR over Jameis, who now has a right shoulder injury, but they made the choice before that happened. Yeah, can't touch anyone in this passing game other than maybe David Njoku.
Yeah, and does Jameis really have that sort of an injury? Like, or is this just kind of, hey, fans, give us a free pass. We know you guys like Winston and you want to see him, but we're just going to try to ride this out and get a better draft pick. Yeah, man, everything was down, and Njoku was kind of really the only one that survived, and I don't think you can trust that either. It was nice. He gave you 14.6 points, coming off of a hamstring injury, 32% target share. But man, Jerry Jeudy, 4 fantasy points. Elijah Moore, 4.1. Of course, Cedric Tillman missed the game again with a concussion. So DTR, we talked about it. We downgraded all these guys massively, and I'm glad that we did. I mean, at this point, Jerry Jeudy, boom bust wide receiver 3 is where I had him last week. He's a boom bust wide receiver 4. I think you just have to be aggressive on moving these sort of players down when you see a guy like DTR. That is a great quote from Paul Charchian, because yes, if you watch this game, like DTR had no clue what was going on in this game. Like, it just, this game is just so far in front of him right now. He's just not ready to be doing these things. The one positive we have from the Browns, and I don't know how excited you can get, because a DTR-led offense is not going to be really that good. But Jerome Ford did take over that running back 1 role. We know he shared it a little bit more. Yes, Deonta Foreman did get a carry inside the 5-yard line that he ended up fumbling and scored negative fantasy points.
He did that before this year. What is their obsession with feeding this guy? Come on.
I don't know. Well, the Panthers did it too, though, and he was pretty good for them like 2 years ago. So Foreman, funny enough, like when he gets his chances, he's actually been pretty decent. But Jerome Ford looked great, man, right out of the gate. Like first play of the game, I think it was like a 60-yard. Yep. What's funny, dude, is he didn't tap out. He stayed on the field for the next play. I was so impressed just by that alone. I was like, oh man, this dude's conditioned. He's like, I'm not giving up my shot. I'm staying on the field. But 24.1 fantasy points for him today, 79% of the snaps. If you look at his design rush attempt shares, 46%, but that's not due to the running backs. That's due to DTR. DTR was involved in the run game, but he had 11 of the 15 carries for the running backs on the day, 69% route participation. Nice. So full-time role. So I would say a guy that's right there in that borderline running back 2. If this was a Jameis Winston-led offense, Ian, we might be talking about high-end. Sorry, I said wide receiver 2, borderline running back 2. If it was a Jameis Winston-led offense, we'd probably be talking more about a high-end running back 2.
Not exactly a layup matchup next week against the Dolphins as well. But yeah, can feel at least pretty good about Jerome Ford. David Njoku, more of that borderline tight end 1. Maybe he creeps into the top 10, depending on how some of the injuries shake out. Otherwise, yes, we want nothing to do with these Cleveland Browns. So they want to give a shout out to Myles Garrett, first player in NFL history with over 100 sacks before turning 29. Absolute beast. And for my money's worth, probably the single best player in the NFL, single best defensive player in the NFL. Yes. So otherwise, Bengals taking on the Broncos next Saturday. Feeling good about any and all of those members you have still on your fantasy team. Move on to maybe the game of the day. The Commanders. That's right. The Commanders took down the Philadelphia Eagles 36-33. Washington entered as 4-point dogs. So good for them on getting that win outright. The over did cash with relative ease here at 47. So really was the Jaden Daniels show. Tough matchup. Be damned. He threw for 5 touchdowns, 258 yards. And as he's known to do, Dwain chipped in plenty of goodness on the ground as well. 81 rushing yards specifically. So won the game with a game winner to Jamison Crowder from 9 yards out. With just 6 seconds left. That was the second score to Jamison Crowder eliminated. Zacchaeus also had 2. And yes, scary Terry McLaurin overcame, what do they call it? Quinn Tomino Bay or whatever. Quinton Mitchell. Yeah, he's really good, but Terry beat him and scored. So 60 yards for Terry. And just good seeing Dwain. This Washington offense proved that, no, even one of the toughest matchups in the league, not enough to hold Jaden and the boys down.
Yeah, and I will talk about Brian Robinson Jr. He had an absolute dud. It was a tough matchup, 2.1 fantasy points, but once again, Ian, 63% of the snaps, 10 of the 15 attempts for the running backs, 56% route participation. So he's out there doing his thing. He just didn't get the fantasy points in a tough matchup today.
Lost 2 fumbles.
Do what?
He lost 2 fumbles.
Was it 2? I saw 1, so he lost 2 fumbles. Well,
he got charged with 2. Sometimes they're a little finicky. You know how they go, but continue.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, we should, he's a guy that in a better matchup, like you're going to like more, but the fumble thing, we'll have to definitely pay attention to. Sometimes, the coaches do get pissed off about that sort of thing. We've definitely seen that. And then the only other note I would say, you mentioned Zacchaeus. He was second behind Terry McLaurin. Well, he was tied for second behind Terry McLaurin with a 71% route participation. De'Ami Brown was also right there. So, but 24 points for Zacchaeus today, 22% target share. So, man, it's going to be a tough guy unless you're in a skank league. And when I say skank league, I'm talking 16-teamer with 3 wide receivers and 2 flex. Like, I really don't want to be in any spot where I'm starting Zacchaeus. I would want to see another good game before trying to trot him back out there. But I will say he's had his moments this year. He's had multiple And it was a situation where Noah Brown came to the team, then he kind of stepped forward. But earlier in the year, we were seeing a little bit of this from Zacchaeus as well. Had a few small flashes, historically as well on some other teams. So don't want to completely dismiss him, but obviously you would have to be in a really deep league to want to put him in any sort of fantasy lineup in your championship game.
We'll note one of the touchdowns very much a blown coverage. Eagles trying to get guys off the field, but hey, did score another.
They had one called back last week, so it kind of levels out.
The sheesh gods, tend to balance out the universe, Dwayne. But yeah, we'll note that Brian Robinson, even though he did have those fumbles, was still in there on the last drive. And you asked for an easier matchup, Dwayne. Well, he's got one versus the Falcons next Sunday night, man. Now we can all of a sudden get excited because Austin Eckler not due back until week 18 at the absolute earliest. So good stuff there. Only other question I have was, did we see a full-time role for Zach Ertz? Because he did come in limited with both a shoulder injury and coming off the concussion.
82% routes, only a 6% target share. So you can argue, maybe it wasn't effective, but we know how targets go. Sometimes, it's just the way the progression works. So wouldn't read too much into it, but he was out there for a full-time role, but only 2.2 fantasy points.
And a revenge game too, no less, Dwayne. You hate to see it. Well, otherwise, on the Eagles side of the ball, Jalen Hurts sadly only got to play for 2 series before he got knocked out of the game with a concussion. Had 41 rushing yards before, but yeah, that absolutely sucks if you were relying on him in Fantasyland. Led the way for Kenny Pickett, still wearing 2 gloves for whatever reason. He went out there and honestly, he decided to throw the ball to A.J. Brown almost every single play, and that is not a bad strategy, Dwayne. Ended up getting A.J.B. 15 targets out there, caught 8 of them for 97 yards and a touchdown. Also, I don't know how many freaking flags he had drawn on Marshawn Lattimore, man. Ended up leaving the game with a hamstring injury, talking about Lattimore, but really did seem like another 3 or 4 occasions and probably could have called him more, and this dude was all over A.J.B. the entire game.
Felt like a Mike Evans kind of thing. It was, I was waiting for some shoving.
Yeah, man, they were getting after it. So, hey, Lattimore kind of just proving that if you do hold every single play, well, they're probably not going to call all of them there by the end of it. So, good stuff. By
A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, my only note here, combined for a 92% target share.
It was literally
60% to A.J. Brown and 32% to Devonta Smith. Now, not a ton of passes. 8 targets for A.J. Brown and 6 for Devonta Smith.
Kenneth Gainwell had 1 target. Saquon Barkley had 1 that he actually dropped. Would have been good for like 30. And that was literally it outside.
Good play, by the middle line. Who was it? Middle linebacker, old Seattle, Bobby Wagner playing through.
Bobby Wags. Just gotta play through the whistle, Dwayne. We've always said that. Eagles going up against the Cowboys next week. That is going to be on Sunday, so you'd like to think Hurts is going to have enough time to clear the concussion protocol. Certainly will be a situation to keep an eye on, and I'm sure all the quote unquote insiders will be sure to just tell us the info as soon as the team accounts tell everyone the info first anyway. So as always, want to give a shout out to Saquon Barkley, 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, had a 68-yard house call. I mean, he had over 100 yards in I think the first quarter. So really continuing to prove he is, probably the single.
Washington completely loaded the box after Jalen left. They were loaded earlier on, but man, they completely it was a struggle for Saquon once Jalen was out.
Needs 267 rushing yards in his last 2 games to break Eric Dickerson's single season record. Does he get there, Dwayne?
I think he does.
He's got the Cowboys. That's a great start. And the Giants in week 18.
You want Jalen, though. I think you really want Jalen, and the threat of him and what the help they have a great offensive line, but the threat of Jalen as well with him and the way they use Jalen in the design run game. And just the overall health of the offense is better with Jalen versus Kenny Pickett, right? As far as, sustaining drives, giving yourself a chance to keep getting carries. If you don't have Jalen, I think that might make it a little bit trickier, but Saquon's still going to get fed. So I think he does. I think he gets there.
Are you going to be like one of those old men who are like, Dickerson did it in 16 games. This doesn't count.
No, man. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to insinuate? I can say I'm old. You can't. No.
One of them. Not that you are.
I love Saquon Barkley. Like, I'm so pissed I didn't draft him more. And like, this is just, I love what he's doing. He's been a great player. He's battled some injuries. I think we're seeing he's just truly an amazing player, and he's finally healthy again. He's on a good team. I'm happy for him.
I'm jealous of the people who have 2 fantasy teams and they just drafted Saquon on both. Because even if you did draft a good amount of Saquon, it wasn't enough. The only proper amount was 100% out there. So kudos to anyone who managed to do that. Sitting pretty heading into Championship Sunday here next week. So think that one about does it. We'll note that Will Shipley also had a concussion. So seems like Saquon is healthy, but Kenneth Gainwell, still remains a pretty good handcuff out there. So again, Commanders versus the Falcons next Sunday night. Eagles versus the Cowboys. It should be a good situation, hopefully, for that Eagles DST to feast. We will see what happens there. So guys, plenty of more recap goodness to break down. But first, a quick word to our friends over at Bud Light.
Even if you score, always stay hungry. No matter how hard you football, it's easy to sun.
Gotta love me some Bud Light, and gotta love me the Panthers taking down the Cardinals 36-30. Carolina entered as 5.5-point dogs. They won outright. Overcast here at 47. So, man, Bryce Young, not a perfect performance. Could have made things a bit easier. This one did go to overtime. He missed one of his receivers named Dan Chisena.
Yeah.
Chisena. Don't act like y'all Chisena. Who is this guy?
He's been around a minute.
Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, missed him at the end of regulation. They had ended up going to overtime, but still made some good plays throughout. 2 touchdowns to Thielen. The one to Thielen, one to David Moore. The one to Moore was dropped in a bucket. Really good stuff there. Actually hit our guy Tommy Trumbull's before that, taking a huge shot. So had some good throws, but $158 through the air. Really was more impressive on the ground, Dwain. Bryce Newton out there, 5 carries, 68 yards, and a touchdown. Looking good, man. So Bryce Young continuing to, hey, just keep them competitive. Obviously got the win this week, but that Cowboys game last week is really the only time in the last 5 or 6 games that the Panthers haven't had a chance to get the win outright late. So good stuff there, and looking forward to seeing what Bryce can do in 2025, hopefully with some more playmakers in the offense. But he still does have Chuba Hubbard, of course, and that is great because my man's ran for 152 yards and 2 scores, the last of which did win the game in OT. So overcame some of those demons from back in that Giants game when he kind of messed that one up. But I guess the more fantasy relevant news, Dwain, because we all know how good Chuba is already, is what to make of this wide receiver room. No Xavier Leggett. Doesn't seem like he's exactly, someone we should expect to see back in week 17 or at all this season. And we also have banged up versions of Jalen Coker and David Moore out there. So I know Adam Thielen was the main guy, but what did we see otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, it's Adam Thielen. Like, that's really the only thing you need to know. 15.3 PPR points, 25% target share, led the team again. I mean, he's by far just been their top wide receiver for a month now. So I think we just have to trust it. Jalen Coker did have a 91% route participation, which was actually number 1 on the team. Had a sweet one-handed catch that he nearly got down in the back of the end zone. Just couldn't get that second foot down. That would have been a great touchdown catch. He had a 21% target share, just wasn't able to translate much of that into fantasy points with only 2.8 on the day. So yeah, it's Thielen. But next would be Jalen Coker, and he's pretty much like a 20% target share guy in these games, Ian, where he's out there. Even when he's been out there with Xavier Leggett earlier in the year, honestly, he looked like the better receiver than the guy they spent the early round pick on. Obviously, Jalen Coker out of Holy Cross, one is an undrafted player, but looking really good.
Shout out to all the fellow cokeheads out there. But yeah, man, I honestly thought it looked like he was surprised he almost caught it. Like, it was a sweet one-handed catch because he had plenty of room to get the second foot down. Unfortunately, he did not, and we were left sheeshing. But over with the Cardinals, another game just left you wanting a bit more from Kyler. Did actually show up in the fantasy box score, though, by the end of it. So 202 passing yards and just 1 touchdown. Did throw a pick and lose a fumble. But hey, when we finally, Dwain, got some rushing production, it ended up being okay. 63 yards on the ground and 1 score, which again helps save what was otherwise not all that great of a real life performance. So good stuff from Kyler. They get the Rams next week on Sunday night. If you go all the way back to week 2, that was the best game and biggest game of Marvin Harrison Jr.'s young career. Maybe you can get him going again, because just 39 scoreless yards on 8 targets. And sadly, in this one, again, I don't know how Kyler throws for 200 yards and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride don't even crack 40. Like, how is that possible out here? Who else is gaining yards in this football game? But Trey McBride, basically worst game of the year, 20 scoreless yards. And as you can imagine, did not score, despite Kyler telling us on TikTok that would be the case. So just, again, more inconsistency from the passing game. We've kind of come to expect it at this point, unfortunately. The real big news, Dwain, is his backfield, because James Conner was going off. Buck 17 and a touchdown on the ground. Also caught 4 passes for 49 yards and then suffered a knee injury. So normally this would be pretty cut and dry, and we could just say, hey, Trey Benson, if James Conner's out, is going to be right up there in the upside RB2 conversation. And maybe he will be back, but we already had Trey Benson out with an ankle injury and now Conner with the knee. So what did we see, Dwain, from Michael Carter? Because, oh yeah, Amari DiMercado's out too.
Yeah, I mean, Carter was the guy that came in. He had 38% of the snaps, 17% of the rushing attempts on the day, 39% route participation. So he's the next guy up right now. But like you mentioned, Trey Benson wasn't in this game. Amari DiMercado on IR. I would say if Trey Benson's back, I would expect him to be the early down back, and I would expect Michael Carter to probably handle a lot of the passing down work. That's a role that the Cardinals let him have last year. That's also a role that we saw him be pretty successful with early in his career with the Jets. So I think you'd probably have a 2-back committee with Trey Benson leading the way if we don't have James Conner next week. So who's the matchup? Do you have it in front of you, Ian?
Rams.
For the Rams. So, I mean, that's a winnable matchup. I would say that probably would make, Trey Benson like a high-end running back 3 if he was practicing in full throughout the week. Not some guy that's like a game time decision. We would obviously move him lower down the ranks. And if that happened, then I would say, yeah, maybe Michael Carter would kind of be the Amir Abdullah from like 3 weeks ago when it was like, hey, there's nobody else on the team. And he's a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield. And we've actually seen that work out. That would make him, I still would struggle to put him in the running back 2 range on a full slate of games. But I mean, look, if you're playing in a skank league, he could be in that borderline running back 2, territory, a guy that, has a shot at 15 touches, Ian, or 15 opportunities between carries and targets. Like he could easily get to that.
You don't think we could get him up ahead of like Tony Pollard, Jerome Ford?
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, Jerome Ford actually looked good, but yeah, I like this offense a little. I like this offense as bad as Kyler's been. I like it a lot better than the Browns right now with DTR. But still, like he's a borderline running back too. Like I wouldn't argue like if you ranked him ahead some of those other guys, but I'm not going to be excited about putting him in my lineup.
It's just tough because I am worried that it's more so the Braylon Allen sort of handcuff here because we saw DiMercado have the pass down work. They also have DJ Dallas out there, and he is a guy that's going to be used more on pass downs than anything. And the fact that Benson is hurt, I mean, it really would be tough to expect him to just walk in this 80% snap role. So, probably would start guys like Jerome Ford and maybe even Tony Pollard ahead of Trey Benson. We'll have plenty of time this week to break this down. I'm sure this will not be the last time we talk about it. So I will say Benson did not practice all week, so maybe looking a bit iffy. Fingers crossed James Conner is just good to go and he can get right back into our fantasy lineup. So think that one about does it here for the Panthers and Cardinals. We can move on now to the Falcons taking down the Giants 34-7, covering with ease as 9.5-point faves. The under did cash here at 43. So Michael Penix Jr. debut. Look good, has a strong arm, has more mobility than Kirk Cousins, which is not saying much, but he certainly does. 202 yards on 18 of 27 passing, technically 1 interception, but it was just a silly rookie mistake, Dwain. He thought he could throw the ball to Kyle Pitts, and Kyle Pitts said, come on, man, what are you doing here? And he just kind of gave the ball away to the Giants in the red zone. So that was sweet, but yeah, otherwise Michael Penix out there doing his thing. Seemed like we still saw a run-first offense, Dwain, but that also could have been because the Falcons were up, 31-7 midway through the third quarter.
Yeah, and Bijan was playing well, so I mean, just feed him, and that's all they needed to do due to the opponent. But no change in the pecking order. I mean, which is kind of what we expected. London still led the way, 31% target share, gave you 10.9 fantasy points, so not great. But again, wasn't a big passing day for the Falcons. Not all due just to Penix, but due to the game script, like you said. Mooney was number 2 as far as target share at 23%. He led the team, though, as far as PPR scoring, 13.2. And then it was Ray McLeod still with a 90% route participation rate, only 5.7 PPR points. But I mainly just name him to say that Kyle Pitts still number 4. Kyle Pitts with a 66% route participation, 1.2 fantasy points for Pitts.
Let's get Charlie Warner some more run, man. I'm so done with Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. Well, now Pitts has no more excuses now. Like this was really his chance this year. I mean, we just can't, there's no way we can keep going back to the well. And previously it was always like the underlying targets per route run, air yards per route run, all those sort of things kind of told they were still leaning toward, man, there might really be talent here. Well, now all that's gone. There's just nothing to get excited about with Kyle Pitts anymore. Now he just looks like a flat out bust.
Yeah, him, OJ Howard. At least OJ Howard had some injuries going on. I know Kyle Pitts has been banged up a little bit in his short career.
Kyle Pitts versus Jamar Chase. Oof.
Ouch. Yeah. Sorry about that one, Falcons. All right, Darnell Mooney, 82 scoreless yards. Drake London, 59 scoreless yards. But again, the fact that we did see Penix go out there and look good, certainly think we can still get behind Drake London as, a lower end wide receiver 2, Mooney in that wide receiver 3 range ahead of next Sunday's potential shootout against the Commanders on Sunday night. So should be a fun one there. Willing to keep an eye on Drake London's hamstring injury, kept him out of the game later. However, head coach Raheem Morris did say, quote, I believe he would have went back in. I look forward to him being ready to practice next week. So for me, Dwain, I don't have the coach speak index in front of me. Shout out, great account over there. Maybe they can tell us a little bit more about Raheem Morris. But when the head coach says that, I feel better than the player necessarily. So hopefully, again, London going to be okay. He's been playing through a few of these, sorts of injuries throughout the year anyway. Over with the Giants, hopefully you started the Falcons DST because Drew Lock threw you 2 pick sixes. If so, also lost a fumble. I've been able to try to find something good to say about him these last few games, Dwain, and I got nothing. Drew Lock has broke me. That's what we've gotten to.
I think he's better than Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I think that might be.
That's
and
true.
I don't know. I think it's close.
At this point in time, Drew Lock is a better Seahawks backup QB than Sam Howell. We'll see if that sticks for how much longer, but we got that going for right now. He did at least find Tyron Tracy for a touchdown in the back of the end zone. Very nice Tony toe tap from Tracy. Almost like he used to play wide receiver or something like that. But yeah, otherwise, shout out Malik Neighbors, broke OBJ's rookie record for receptions, up to 97 on the year now. And Wan'Dale Robinson also caught 7 balls for 62 scoreless yards on 12 targets because, of course, he did. So anything to add here on the New York Football Giants, Dwain, who, by the way, now control their destiny to get the #1 overall pick if they lose out.
Good job on that, Giants. That's all I have to add. The only other thing I would say is Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson combined for 70% target share today. So second to A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith as a duo. So way to go, guys.
Pretty sure it is Neighbors and because it was a couple weeks ago where I took the top 2 options on every team to see who had the most target share, just with the 2 players, and it was Neighbors and Wan'Dale for quite a while. So probably still up there. They face the Colts next week.
Neighbors, man, is leading the league, so he's carrying a ton of the weight. I mean, Neighbors as a rookie is like around a third. I didn't check to see where he's at after this game, but probably 35% target share. So yeah, look, Neighbors gonna be good. Got to get him a quarterback. So we want that top draft pick, and hopefully whoever the Giants take is a hit.
Shador Sanders already seen throwing the pigskin around with Malik Neighbors, so maybe it could go that route. I hear you on Neighbors, Wayne. It's just hilarious to me that Wan'Dale Robinson has 123 targets this year. He's 10th.
I would not guess that. Even though I look at utilization stuff every week and I look at target shares, I would not guess that Wan'Dale Robinson has 123 targets. That's crazy.
Same amount of games. Amon-Ra St. Brown has 1 more target than Wan'Dale this year. Like, imagine telling like a genie comes to us in August and tells us that, and we'd start drafting Wan'Dale like everywhere at his ADP if we knew that, and it still, has barely worked out.
Sometimes even targets aren't enough when you play for the Giants.
The Wan'Dale Robinson story. All right. Yeah. Again, facing the Colts next week more than anything. Yeah. Colts DST going to be a really good play in that one. So think that about does it there. Before we move on, though, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Game Time because, Dwayne, we both know there's nothing like being at a game in person, especially around the holidays and especially in Pasadena, California, where you guys can check out the Ohio State Buckeyes taking on the Oregon Ducks revenge special. Oh my gosh. Do not sleep on Ryan Day and the boys. We are so back, never been more back. And if you guys want to go check out Game Time to try to find some tickets for that game, boy, you better hurry because I will be looking as well. It is my go-to for finding amazing tickets, but not just for sports, for concerts and shows too. So if that game goes south, I can go drown my sorrows at a concert or a show or something like that. And Dwayne, I was actually scrolling through the Game Time app the other day, and I came across this new feature called Game Time Picks. And let me tell you what, it is a total game changer. Game Time Picks curates your experience, showing you the best deals on great seats, and they make it so easy that it's truly a no-brainer, people. Seriously, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets, and you can find out for yourself by downloading the Game Time app, creating an account, and using the code LIFE for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LIFE, L-I-F-E, for $20 off. Download Game Time today because what time is it? Game time. The Lions took down the Bears 34-17. Detroit covered at 7-point faves. The over cashed here at 47.5. And with that victory, the Lions have now set a new franchise record with 13 wins in a single season. So great job by Dan Campbell and the boys. They're going to have an NFC Championship rematch in San Francisco next Monday night. So that should be a fun one. But otherwise, Dwayne, it was Jared Goff overcoming some of his outdoor demons. 336 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns. Nice 82-yard bomb to Jameson Williams, who had a massive day with 150 total yards. Also had a nice screen to Amon-Ra St. Brown. And Ben Johnson, just continuing to pad that trick play resume, now had Goff basically fake a fumble with him and Jahmyr Gibbs before throwing a wheel throwback to Sam Laporta for the touchdown. So I almost just wonder, Dwayne, like, why even pull out that play against the freaking Bears? Why was he doing all this stuff in the fourth quarter against the Cowboys? But you know what? The guy's bag seems to be limitless, so I'm just going to enjoy it and not, be a major mood killer there. So great stuff there from Ben Johnson and the passing game. And, of course, Jahmyr Gibbs proving that, yes, he should be treated as the overall RB1 in Fantasyland.
Yeah, 25.4 fantasy points, and it was a little disappointing. Again, not trying to be a bummer, but, man, I thought the dude was about to score 40. Today. Obviously, he had 4 carries, I think, in a row where we thought he scored a touchdown.
Finally
he didn't. He was short. Then he got stuffed twice more, and then he got in on the next one. So good for him on that. It was all Jahmyr Gibbs, 69% of the snaps, 74% of the rushing attempts, 61% route participation, and a 16% target share. So essentially everything that was going between him and David Montgomery, except for a little bit, went to Craig Reynolds. He had 15% of the snaps. There was a little bit behind that as well, but it wasn't even to Vakai, the other guy we thought it would be. It would be to Jameer Jefferson, who was the guy, not Justin Jefferson, but he was elevated from the practice squad, but it was mostly in trash time. So yeah, all Jahmyr Gibbs. The only thing I would note here is Laporta is on a nice 4-game streak now, Ian. 14.3 fantasy points today. In the 3 previous games, 18.1, 10.4, and 15.6. He's had right around a 20% target share or better in all of those games, slightly under in a couple, but maybe he's part of the offense again. So yeah, Laporta still not doing what you had hoped when you drafted him in the 3rd round of a fantasy draft. Your team's, you're probably complaining to me like, dude, my team's dead because Laporta sucked early in the season. But if you squeaked through, because I have him on a dynasty team, and I've at least felt like I can start him now. Yeah. I can at least put him in the lineup. It's not a high-end tight end 1 kind of thing, but not giving us duds. Kind of like in that Mark Andrews range, right? We know we're not going to get full-on Mark Andrews, but, 75% of Mark Andrews is still better than a lot of other tight ends.
Should be his 4th straight top 10 fantasy finish, which again, pretty good out there if you ask me. So only the note I had with the Lions was Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 catches, 70 yards and a touchdown. Plenty good day. We'll note he had a 28-yard gain early that, it was probably Goff's worst pass of the day. Didn't want to overthrow him. I get it. But man, if he even catches that somewhat in stride, yeah, it could have easily been a 50-yard touchdown there. So moving on to the Bears. Nice game from Caleb Williams, man. Only took 2 sacks out there. Another game with no picks. Dwayne, I was going through my 32 facts article, and I was trying to put Caleb's rookie season just alongside some of the other ones we've seen over the last 15 years or so. And his touchdown to interception ratio is legit top 5, top 6. I know it's not everything, and it's just a counting stat, but there have been some highs, and hey, we got more today. 334 yards and 2 scores, one of which was a complete dime to Keenan Allen. The other one, play action to Cole Kmet at the goal line. But you know what? Those count as well. So really, Keenan did end up being the star of the show. 9 catches, 141 yards, and a tud on 13 targets. Dwayne, if this holds up, it's probably going to be his 4th top 5 finish in the last 6 weeks. Yeah, it turns out, call him Fat Keenan all you want, man. He's still Keenan Allen.
Yeah, Fat Keenan was a lie, guys. He was just playing injured early in the year. This dude's still a baller, and I get it. He gets to play an insulated sort of position, but he's the 32-year-old wide receiver still doing this. So let's just give him some credit. We didn't bang on Larry Fitzgerald back in the day when he got to move inside and play the slot and score 20 fantasy points per game. So look, that's where Keenan's at. If we look at him, you just mentioned it, 4 out of the last 5 games, 20 plus PPR points in 4 out of 5. He's had a 30% target share or higher in 3 of the last 5 games. So I get it. Even if some of it's gimmicky, fine. You could, guess what? A gimmicky player you just throw in the slot can't get a 30% target share. Period. They can't. Well, maybe they can if they're Wan'Dale Robinson. That would be the one example. But look, Keenan Allen's doing more than Wan'Dale. He is actually getting these targets down the field. You mentioned, the touchdown catch. So look, I just want to. I think you just have to give the guy a hat tip. I get it. He's playing from the slot. We all acknowledge that. To be able to come out and keep doing this, though, I think it looks like really the only reason he wasn't balling early in the year was just due to an injury. The dude's been really good since we came back from the bye.
I mean, at this point, Dwayne, I had him ranked ahead of DJ Moore this week. Not that DJ's going away, but my one issue with this, I have more than one issue with the Bears offense. Don't get me wrong, but they're using DJ Moore almost as this pure gadget. That's the gadget player right now. His ADOT is in the complete gutter. He's getting running back touches, which are cool, but like, give me a couple of those. Don't make that his whole new identity. So that's been weird to see. We did see Rome Odunze get 77 yards. I mean, this passing performance was what we kind of would have hoped to see on a far more consistent basis for the Bears. And it has shown up, and you brought up the Keenan numbers a bit more recently, but even this one again, man, they're down 13-0 at the end of the first quarter. They're down 27-14 by halftime, man. Fourth straight game in a row, maybe fifth straight, where they've just been getting killed early on. And leads to fantasy friendly comeback mode, but just tough to completely.
They're going to get Ben Johnson. Like, I mean, I just feel like it's almost a lock. Like, how can they not? They've had an up close experience with having to deal with the dude.
They want him.
I mean, you've got the weapons, you've got a quarterback.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, that's the only question. Does Ben Johnson want to go to Chicago? That's all I'm saying.
Well, he's already said he's got interest, so we'll see.
We will see for sure. So Bears versus Seattle next Thursday night, Dwayne. We've had Keenan ranked more in that like wide receiver, borderline wide receiver 2 range. Have you seen enough at this point to say, hey, get back in there in the top 20?
Man, the utilization score, we already went there 3 weeks ago. I mean, so I mean, we've had him right there, high end wide receiver 3, low end wide receiver 2 for multiple weeks. So, I mean, I think the argument now is like, do you push him up closer to like a high-end wide receiver 2 status? I think there's still just enough volatility due to Caleb. You got other guys you got to feed. I'm not really going to move Keenan up higher than that, but his utilization score over the last 5 games says he's really a borderline wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at it. We had, let's see, where did we kind of end up with Keenan consensus this week? Yeah, again, item wide receiver 27, wide receiver 29, wide receiver 30 among our rankers. Yes, it's easy to say in hindsight that was too low, but just looking straight up, man, Keenan versus Cooper Kupp versus Cortland Sutton. Let's just ride the hot hand at this point.
Hey, hot hand is a real thing. I mean, we've seen it multiple times with wide receivers this year. And again, it comes down to like what the film's telling, defensive coordinators and what they need to try to take away. The beauty of Keenan's role is it really is tough to take away because they move him around so much, gets to play inside. So, I think he's kind of, he's a little bit, I don't want to say like he's completely, protected from all of that, but it does help to be in that. Like we've seen Cooper Kupp fall off despite having a similar kind of role. So it's not like you're immune to a downturn, but Keenan, man, looking really good over the last month.
Last question would just be DeAndre Swift. Lesser role or Roschon Johnson back?
No, really the same. Roschon was not that involved, honestly. 27% of the snaps, 73% to DeAndre Swift.
Swift almost had a touchdown there, but got stopped at the 1. And then they did the aforementioned play action touchdown to Cole Kmet the very next play. So unfortunate there, but hey, hopefully Bears fans, you guys do indeed get Ben Johnson. Would certainly be pretty great for investing in them in Fantasyland in 2025 and beyond. Let's move on to the Colts, taking down the Titans 38-30. Indy did cover as 3.5-point favorites, and the overcash of 42.5 was not easy though. I mean, we saw the Colts go up 38-7 before Mason Rudolph, Tajay Spears, and Chiggy Okonkwo did what they do best, and that is rack up fantasy points in garbage time. But we will start with the winners, and that was Anthony Richardson yet again for the 7-8 Colts. Only 131 yards and a touchdown and a pick through the air. Only threw the ball 11 times, but hey, Dwayne got that completion percentage over 50% and did admittedly make some clutch throws there at the end to help finally ice the game. So did also score a rushing touchdown, had 70 yards as well. Almost had a second one. I honestly thought he crossed the goal line, but they ruled him just short, which let his buddy and apparently now fantasy superstar Jonathan Taylor get his 3rd touchdown of the day. 218 total, had 65 and 70-yard house calls. I absolutely loved on the first one, Dwayne, where he would not let go of that ball for anyone. Basically, Comer out of the Friday Night Lights movie, where you wouldn't even give it to the refs. So yeah, would have been a lot cooler if we saw these sort of boons from JT maybe a bit more earlier in the season, but good to see he can still do it.
Yeah, and it's the long speed. We've seen it 2 games in a row. That's 3 really long runs. Obviously, one of them, he didn't get across the end zone line because he dropped the ball last next week. But yeah, just seeing the fact that he is able to hit these top speeds. And again, just the offensive line getting healthy for the Colts. We'll see what happens with the injury report this week. But we've talked about it earlier in the year that they were missing, some key players. And so Jonathan Taylor, just following his blocks. And I know to some extent you watch it and you're like, man, he wasn't even touched. But he's also taking the right angles. He's got the right acceleration, and he's got the long speed to go ahead and put it away. Those things are really good to see from JT. So that's nice for next year. One thing that's not nice for next year, even though this was a little bit of a better game for Richardson, you mentioned the completion rate, but man, in his fully healthy games this year, he's now gone over 200 yards only 3 out of 10 times. This is terrible. This is like DTR kind of stuff. It's just, for fantasy, Richardson could still end up being fine. But for running an NFL team, man, they got to figure something out for him. I get it. He's only in his second year, but man, I think it's just hard to, if anyone tells you, oh, Richardson, you're an idiot. If you think he's not going to turn into a good quarterback. No, they can't say that. Might he? Yeah, he could. But I would say right now, the odds aren't looking really good, to me, Ian. So the body of work, not ideal for Richardson. And that hurts. A guy like Josh Downs, man, is an absolute beast.
Yeah.
This dude came out here with a 36% target share. Now, it was he had minus 3% of the team's air yards today. So it was all around the line of scrimmage. He was tethered completely, but we've seen him do the other things earlier this year, but 15.1 PPR points, but it's just hard still to trust him because we just know we have these manic up and down episodes whenever we talk about Anthony Richardson.
Shout out to Downs for busting one of those short screens for a 31-yard touchdown. Also, shout out to AD Mitchell, had a nice 36-yard over the shoulder.
Yeah, that was a great catch.
Very, very nice catch. Got the separation as he is known to do. I guess I'm thinking about Jalen Hurts, Dwain, his second season, second half of that year.
Josh Allen did it too. There are examples, but this will be year 3 now for Richardson.
Yeah, so and the difference
there are outliers.
There are outliers, but the difference is Josh and Jalen had rookie year Devonta Smith by that second season. I'm not trying to throw shade at him by any stretch, but that still wasn't this super dynamic wide receiver room. They got A.J. Brown. They got Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. Yeah, sure, let's add another sweet wide receiver in Indy, but we saw Joe Flacco there, man. We don't watch Colts games like, man, they just had another great receiver. The great receivers are usually wide open.
They have good enough receivers to support a quarterback. Yeah. I'm not saying they're one of the best in the league, but they have service. They have 2 good receivers, and Adonai Mitchell is, or Alec Pierce, whichever one's on the field, that's good enough to be at least something the defense has to respect, right? As someone that can make a big play. So, yeah, we'll see where it goes. Again, I'm not completely writing Anthony Richardson off, but if I had to say right now today, I would be leaning towards him being a bust.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you look at it, not going to be 23 until May, but just one of those things where as the sample size grows, the amount of starts, and you start looking at it, it gets harder and harder to say, oh, yeah, that's going to be the outlier. All those other 30 busts around him, those are busts. This one is different, I swear. So in the meantime, good win for the Colts. And yeah, hopefully you had Jonathan Taylor on your fantasy squad. Meanwhile, with the Titans, again, mentioned the spirited comeback effort from Mason Rudolph. He did throw 3 interceptions in the meantime. But yeah, I did find Calvin Ridley for a nice touchdown down the sideline to start things off. And then, of course, got Nick Westbrook-Akini involved again. Now has 9 scores on the season. And when I looked it up earlier, only Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, and Amon-Ra St. Brown had more. Absolute kingship from NWI himself. But Dwayne, the big, kind of discussion coming in was what to make about Tony Pollard versus Tajay Spears. And yeah, it turns out Tajay Spears is just such an elite goal line back, man, that we need to keep going back to the well here, I guess.
21.6 PPR points for Spears, but we also had Pollard dealing with an ankle injury coming into this week, just like last week. So it's hard to know what's actually going on here. We also had the wild game script that you talked about, how big the Colts jumped out. So it's a lot of this is trailing game script. Some of it is the injury to Pollard. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but the bottom line is Spears has looked good with this opportunity. He led the way by far today, 60% of the team's snaps. And again, that was game script driven. 48% of the rushing attempts versus 38% for Pollard. Who knows how much of that's due to the injury? I do think he's taken over the passing down work. We've seen that now 3 games in a row. Yep. Okay, so 58% route participation versus 39% for Tony Pollard. Had a 12% target share. Pollard also got some targets, even though he wasn't out there as often. He also had a 12% target share. So I think we're just looking at this being a closer split, and Pollard obviously has a lot more volatility now. Due to the injury, due to the way we've seen these game scripts recently really impact his playing time. So he was a guy that for a good stretch, we pretty much had him locked into that mid-range running back 2 territory. regardless of matchup, regardless of the issues that we have with the Titans offense, but now really looking more like a borderline running back 2, high-end running back 3. I think honestly, you need a leading game script. And if you were thinking of a game where you might be able to get it, like, I mean, the Colts defense has been pretty soft. They've been better recently, still a pretty soft matchup. So didn't work this week. It's hard to get too encouraged. The only other note I'll give, Okonkwo, man, with a season high 83% route participation, 19.1 PPR points, 33% target share. Look, I get it. It feels like forever ago that we thought, okay, Chig Okonkwo, if you remember back, I think it was 2 seasons ago, Ian, maybe it was 3, small sample size, but it was like, okay, like he can make some plays. Like he's a playmaker. He's not like a full route tree guy, but like you can get him on the drags. You can let him use his athleticism. You can throw him some screens. He can run a seam route, do some things for you, man. Why not just let this guy play a full role at this point? These guys rotate like 4 guys. You got like Nick Van Ett, Josh Wiley, some other dude, I don't even remember his name, Chig Okonkwo. It's 4 guys. Like, why not just let the guy that can actually do something with the ball in his hands play a little bit more? He did well today.
Nick Van Ett is a Central Ohio, Westerville Central finest, Dwain. So be careful there talking about the tight end.
He's a good blocker.
But yeah, he
Nick
is.
Van Ett's a very fine blocker, like Jeremy Ruckert, and we could keep going.
There we go. But yeah, no, man, I couldn't agree more with Chig. I mean, that rookie year, which was 2 years ago, I mean, he was up there with Travis Kelce and these guys just in terms of the per route efficiency, small sample size, but yeah, makes the most out of his opportunities. So I will say, Dwain, as easy as it would be to write off these offenses in most matchups, we get the Colts at the Giants next week. So yeah, feeling great about Taylor and Richardson. Probably, man, is going to be knocking on that top 12 door himself, already was this week. And then we get the Titans at the Jaguars. So certainly a worse pass defense in Jacksonville, but not exactly great against the run either. I mean, are you going to be ranking Spears ahead of Pollard? I feel like Pollard still does have the better utilization. And if there was going to be a game,
probably
some positive game script,
probably have them right next to each other. I honestly think it's a bit hard to say right now. I do think some of it will come down to how healthy. You know, if we see Pollard come out and fully practice and everything's good. Now, look, granted, like he's basically not practice, and then we see him, you know, come out and start the game and everything. I'd like to see him off the injury report. That would help. That might make me give him a little bit of an edge, but I think you got to put these two guys pretty close right now. I do think Pollard's still the lead early down back, but like my confidence interval on that is like not as high as it used to be. Like used to, I'd be like, he's got that role locked down. Now Tyjae Spears playing good. It's like, man, he could force us to continue to evolve, right? Even with Pollard being healthy, he could make the coaching staff be like, why don't we just split this down the even no matter what the game script is, because Tajae's looked good.
Middle-class man's version of the Steelers situation, which we honestly aren't all that excited about getting involved with as well. So we'll say Pollard, despite being so banged up, he might have actually won Kyle Brandt's, angry run of the week, had a nice trust
right away
early. Yeah, it doesn't seem like he's too much worse for the wear. And shout out to our own Jeff Ulrich, has had a great article up on FantasyLife.com breaking down, some players that have certain contract incentives to, make some money out here. And Pollard is pretty close to some big ones. So we'll expect him to do everything in his power to keep on playing out there. Let's talk about the Rams taking down the Jets now. 19-9. Rams did cover as 3-point faves. The under did cash, though, as you could guess, at 47. So pretty much a letdown from the Rams offense, Dwain. We talked about the Jets secondary not being all that, but just 110 yards for Matthew Stafford. Weather wasn't great. He only threw the ball 19 times, so I'm not saying they completely shut this offense down, but really, at least for today, it was Kyren Williams and everyone else.
Yeah, I don't think there's a takeaway from the Rams here. They just had a dud. Stafford didn't really play well. To your point, they didn't need to throw the ball a lot. This is a wild game. I thought it was going to be over in 2 hours at one point. Like, I mean, it was, and you would think like for a game like that, there would have been more scoring, but it was just long drives ending in field goals over the first half of the game, which was, I don't know what the record is for a first half of a game, but we should definitely check that game. I'm guessing that it's in the top percentile of quickest first halves that we've seen in at least like the last 20 years, I would say. But otherwise, everything was the same. Normal target guys. I will say Tyler Higbee returned. He gave you 8.1 PPR points today, but only a 32% route participation. So a guy they're still definitely just easing back in. There's another dud for Cooper Kupp, man, 5.4 points. But again, wasn't a lot of points to go around anyway. Nakua led the way with a 47% target share, and that was only worth 13.6. And if you were watching the game, a lot of those were really ineffective screen type plays. But they're just trying to get the ball to him on the boundary, and the Jets were doing a nice job of clogging things up really quickly. So, yeah, just really a Kyren Williams game. He looked good. Other than that, yeah, I think we can just dismiss this. I think we know what the Rams offense is about, and it was just a tough game.
facing the Cardinals next Saturday night. So again, another matchup that we should be expecting, hopefully some fireworks with. This one won't have, cold weather to be used as an excuse. So hopefully we see Kupp and company get back to, being great at football there. Over with the Jets, 256 yards and a touchdown from Aaron Rodgers. Really nice throw in the back of the end zone to Devontae Adams. Unfortunately, didn't have too many other ones just throughout the afternoon. End up losing a fumble, and Devontae 68 yards and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson 54 scoreless yards. Again, just not quite as high of production as we could have hoped for and thought we were maybe going to get. Might not get better the rest of the way as well. The Jets unfortunately seem to have lost first round offensive tackle Olu Fashanu with a foot injury, so hopefully he does get better soon. I think the big point here, Dwayne, is what do we see from Breece Hall, because he wasn't listed on the injury report all week. Meanwhile, Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis were both dealing with back injuries. Yeah,
Breece returned to that full-time workload that we saw, I don't know, like 7-8 weeks ago. It's been a while now. He had 14 fantasy points, 79% snap share, 70% of the rushing attempts, 73% route participation, 14% target share. And to your point, it's hard to know how much of that comes down to the other two guys being injured versus Breece Hall's still a pretty good player, and they fed him earlier in the year, and he's battled his own injuries. So we've also seen games where he spikes like this, and then the next week falls back off. Doesn't like fall off like in completely, dud from a utilization perspective, but just doesn't quite have the same role that we saw. So hard to be overly confident in this. He's the running back one for this team, but I'm not going to get carried away with him, especially with another injury, to your point, to the offensive line. The Jets don't really have a lot to play for right now. So I still think it's going to be a struggle to find a way to get Breece Hall into the top 12 in the fantasy ranks.
Top 20, which, hey, is better than we've been able to do a couple of these past few weeks. So feeling a little bit better. But yeah, at the Bills next week, you can show me the stats about the Bills run defense. But again, it's just one of these situations where Jets offense isn't exactly the group we are loving right now. So Breece, okay, you can put him in there, but you certainly aren't feeling amazing about it. So guys, before we move on though, I want to give a shout out to our friends over at Knockaround. I got the Ram shades on now. Dwayne, what are you rocking with? You look good, man.
These are the Pierside Palisades, man. Ooh. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, check out the Palisades. They're awesome. The bunch of different colors. These are the ones that don't reflect, so you guys can't see my screen. You don't know what I'm looking at like you do with Ian. And if you guys can see that, you got way better eyes than me. I have no clue what Ian's looking at, but I see his screen.
Either way, holiday shoppers, it is a great time to head over to knockaround.com and pick up a pair of polarized shades for you or as a gift for less than $50. With over 25 frame styles and dozens of colors, you are guaranteed to find sunglasses that look good and protect your eyes with full UV 400 protection. And be sure to check out Knockaround's officially licensed NFL collection so you can rep your team all week and hopefully all the way through the playoffs. Visit knockaround.com and use code LIFE for free shipping on your order. Late afternoon contest, Dwayne, we had 4 of them. There's 2 next week. I complain about there being 3 sometimes. 2 late Sunday afternoon games next week, Dwayne. I'm already furious.
Got to play on Christmas, Ian.
Need the Wednesday football, man, for the safety of all these players. But Vikings took down the Seahawks 27-24. Minnesota did cover as 2.5-point faves. The over did cash here at 43. So Sam Darnold, Justin Jefferson, just another chapter in what's been a legendary, comeback season, at least for Darnold. I mean, 2 touchdowns to Jettas, 1 to Addison, the go-ahead score. And the honey hole down the sideline, Dwayne, was completely exhilarating out there. So buck 44 and 2 scores on 13 targets for Justin Jefferson. Addison only 35 yards and a touchdown. But yeah, Kevin O'Connell, Sam Darnold, these guys are cooking one up, one of the best passing games in the league.
Yeah, nothing to add, man. 14.5 fantasy points still, though, for Addison, because he comes through with the big play for you. He had a 23% target share, so he was still involved in the offense, but it was definitely a Justin Jefferson day. I know we had Justin Jefferson just kind of hanging around 15, 20 fantasy points early in the year. He was consistent that way, but you weren't getting those blow-up games. Now we're getting the blow-up games. This was another one with 36.4 fantasy points in a PPR. But yeah, nothing else to add here. Other than Aaron Jones did have a dominant role, but we have not been able to predict whether or not that's going to stick the next week at all. This season. But we've seen these spike games, and I'll tell you, if you see a guy like Aaron Jones on an offense like this with an 80% snap share, you just feel like he's due for like a 30-pointer, but for whatever reason, Ian, it just has not worked out for Aaron Jones. He's been fine, but you would think in a game like that, on an offense like this, you'd be like, man, there's some massive fantasy potential, but it just hasn't played out that way.
I know what the problem is. It's not a problem. He was just saving all the touchdowns for next week's revenge game at home against the Packers, Dwayne. So that's going to be a fun one. Might have the highest game total of the week. Start all the Vikings there. Even TJ Hawkinson, I know he's been a little bit up and down, but again, just a matter of, you got Justin Jefferson, who can blame Sam Darnold for throwing him the ball more often. And then with the Seahawks, Dwayne, Geno Smith, 315 yards, 3 touchdowns, does have the 2 interceptions. Like, again, 95% of all Geno Smith games are awesome. One great throw after another, but I don't know what this dude's deal is with throwing one just atrocious interception per game. He actually almost had another one near the goal line. Man, he keeps doing that inside the red zone, but luckily I forget what Vikings defender dropped that one, but they did. But either way, more good than bad from Geno, and accordingly, more good than bad from his pass catchers. DK Metcalf, 57 yards and a touchdown. Roasted Stephon Gilmore deep early on 7 targets. But really, man, continues to be the Jackson Smith and Jigba show. 8 catches, 95 yards, and a score on a team-high 12 targets. I mean, he's getting back shoulder fades down the middle of the field, Dwayne. Like, you just don't see this that often, but he is a true number 1 wide receiver working out in the slot, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, and a couple of other nice yak plays again today, yards after the catch, making guys miss. Not like a burner or anything, but, man, just seems like he really understands the angles and how to make that first move now, and he's just an efficient player. Like, he's a very efficient player, but a 29% target share today. How high? I know we will be having a show coming up, I don't know, in the next 3 to 4 weeks. We just had a meeting with our producers about what we're looking at for the next month, guys, for you. Where are you going to have Jackson Smith and Jigba? We're going to do a show on way too early ranks.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I think we have to go at least.
He's a wide receiver 2, period.
Yeah.
Like, it's just a matter of how much upside do you think how much more ceiling do you think there is coming off of this year going into year 3?
I mean, he's top 8 in targets in like the entire NFL in full PPR, man.
Is he a low end wide receiver 1? That's kind of where I'm going.
Top 12. He's at least, I was going to say no lower
than wide receiver 2.
No lower than 16th. I think it'd be really hard to rank 15 ahead of him.
But when we actually go through the exercise, it's going to be fun. He's going to be a name that's going to be fun. I'm going to rank him obviously ahead of his own teammate, Metcalf, but yeah, great year from JSN. Nice rebound year. Cause it was tough as a rookie, and it was tough early this year, but man, the light switch has definitely come on.
And this isn't even this fully finished, polished version of the Seahawks offense. Geno's the man, I get it, but this offensive line is still a train wreck. I mean, it was year 1 for Ryan Grubb in the NFL. He's done some good things, but Geno is still, I think, dead last in play action rate. Like, it's not like we're all writing home about Grubb's, work after each and every scheme he's put together. So maybe there is a higher ceiling to him.
JSN had 156 air yards today. I mean, that's the thing. He's been coming through, not just with the yak, but he's occasionally having these big, air yard games. Had a 12.6 average depth of target today. So not just a guy completely, tied to these 3, 4, 5 yard ADOTs. And look, we've seen guys like of his mold, like that's the kind of mold Amon-Ra St. Brown had. Yeah. So, I mean, look, there's JSN looking really good.
That's my point, though. We're getting the floor of those gadgety design plays last Sunday night or whatever. I mean, they're using a bunch out of the backfield and just feeding them some screens that way. But then we also get these spikes in air yards, man, and it's turning into one of the more fantasy-friendly wide receivers, in all fantasy football. So maybe I'm wrong, man. Maybe he should be top 12. Plenty of conversations around that topic ahead of us.
We know you'll look at the Ohio State emblem when you get to him, and you'll move him up. At least a tier.
Go Buckeyes! All right. Last thing here, Dwayne, Kenneth Walker unfortunately suffered an ankle injury. He was ruled doubtful to return. So he's had one just honestly his entire career, one just unfortunate injury after another. Seemingly would, set the stage for Zach Charbonnet, who, by the way, co-starter, team captain announced before the game, and he got his first touch with 1 minute left in the 3rd quarter. So still very much the Kenneth Walker show when he's healthy. But if not, Zach Charbonnet is going to be right back in that, upside RB2 conversation against the Bears on Thursday Night Football.
And Charbonnet was battling an oblique injury this week, so maybe that was a little bit something to do with it. But to your point, if we don't have Kenneth Walker, Charbonnet is going to be a running back 1 because that's what he is in games without Kenneth Walker. So Charbonnet is a must start if Walker doesn't play.
Moving right along, we had the Bills take down the Patriots 24-21. Buffalo did not cover as 14-point faves, and we had the under cash there at 48. So Bills' 8-game streak with 30-plus points was snapped, and yeah, accordingly did not see a good game from Josh Allen. Superman fell back to earth here, just 154 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. The pick was basically an arm punt that the Patriots hilariously tried to bring out of the end zone, so they downed him at the 1-yard line, but also only 28 rushing yards, Dwayne, and I looked this up actually before our LG show this morning. Josh Allen literally led all running backs, quarterbacks, led the entire NFL in fantasy points from rushing over these previous 2 weeks. So again, just ridiculous what he can bring to the table. Unfortunately, he did save the dud for everyone's, semifinals of the fantasy playoffs. So sucks to see that, but does not suck to see James Cook going off 100 rushing yards and a touchdown. Also caught a score, 26 extra yards, through the air as well. And yeah, with those 26 receiving yards, Dwayne, he led the Bills in receiving, which really sucks. Let's just say that.
Yeah. Imagine James Cook on something more than a 36% snap share.
36?
Dude, it's turned into a 3-way committee on this team. Now, he gets more opportunities when he's on the field than the other 2 guys. So, I mean, like, they're purposely trying to get him the ball when he's on the field. But, man, it's a nightmare as far as, like, I say nightmare. He gave you 27.6 fantasy points. You love him. He plays with the Bills. He's in a good offense. He's making big plays. But it could be so much more is basically is the thing. So the Bills love to rotate guys, though, Ian, and that continued with the pass catchers as well. Dalton Kincaid came out here and gave you a 26% target share. Must have been in a full-time role, eh? No, 41% route participation because we had Dawson Knox out there with 59%. Amari Cooper, 53% route participation. Mac Hollins, 77%. Got to get the guy that doesn't wear shoes. Great bit. Got to give him the most routes on the team. Keon Coleman was second with 68%. We did have an inactive Curtis Samuel today. Really? So, I don't know. It's just these guys are all over the place. We love the offense. We love the upside. I say we love the offense. I feel like the offense is like, is it really good? Josh Allen's great, but like, is this offense really that good? It's working, and they just rotate all these guys, so nothing's forcing them to change. Khalil Shakir, he did have a 91% route participation. Of course, it's the day that he gives you the worst fantasy performance with only 4.2, because that's just how these things work.
Again, 30-plus points in 2 straight months, but it's just so weird. I don't remember another offense being this potent, at least in terms of real-life points, and really other than just no pass catchers we can consistently rely on. Khalil Shakir, yeah, okay. He's still been, a wide receiver 3 overall on the season, so.
Yeah, he's a borderline wide receiver 2 right now. I mean, with this route participation is super encouraging because last week it fell, remember? Like below, it was like at 60%. So, but it is hard to predict week to week what they're going to do. Basically, if you have Shakir, you're probably starting him, just because the upside of the Bills offense. But yeah, it's not been consistent as far as his playing time.
Seemed like something might have been going on with Josh Allen's hand or his elbow at the end. I mean, we got the report he's been playing through a fractured left hand, but this was his right. We'll see. I know a couple years ago he had the elbow injury, and then like the next play he throws this 80-yard pass downfield. So obviously this dude's well-versed, well-tuned to play through the pain and everything. But yeah, man, they get the Jets next week. So you're starting Josh Allen, you're starting James Cook, but sadly otherwise, man, no one we can overly rely on, which again, just crazy given the offense we were talking about. But Bills 12-3, great day to be a Bills Mafia fanatic. Let's talk about the Dolphins taking down the 49ers 29-17. Miami winning outright as a 1.5-point dog. The over did cash at 44.5. So Tua Tagovailoa, not the biggest bounce back game, but no Jalen Waddle. So cut him some slack. 215 yards and a touchdown that went to Tyreek Hill. And it's a good thing he got that touchdown because he had just 3 catches for 29 yards otherwise. So thought he did drop a touchdown out there as well. And they were very close on another one. So again, Tyreek getting open, but just story of the season, not really putting up these big numbers. Not the case though for one Devon Achane, Dwayne, who, my gosh, man, rushing $121 and a score at the end. Thank you for not sliding down at the 1-yard line. All of your fantasy managers appreciate that. But also 6 catches for 70 yards. And Dwayne, a lot of Achane's catches this year, they've been on these short swing passes, screens, easy enough plays to get the ball in his hands. They legit lined him up as a wide receiver, had him run a skinny post, and he makes it like a contested catch while taking a shot from the safety, man. Was this dude ever leaving the field out there? Because it looks like they gave him his usual role and then said, yeah, by the way, you can take Jalen Waddle's 3 targets as well.
73% of the snaps, 74% route participation. So no, basically he wasn't leaving the field. HN was the wide receiver 1 and tied for wide receiver 1 on the team with Tyreek Hill with a 23% target share. So yeah, HN, just an amazing player. And honestly, we hadn't seen the efficiency lately. So it was nice to see the big run at the end of this game, the 50-yarder for the touchdown. That was huge for Mr. Matthew Friedman. Probably going to help him take down Thor so that we can have that finals matchup in the Guillotine League. Yeah, I got to mention it again, Thor, just because you were rubbing it in. Yeah, nothing else, though, really here on the Dolphins. Jonnu Smith, 74% route participation, 19% target share, 12.2 fantasy points. Kind of a dud in Jonnu terms, but still fine, right? That's still a good day at the office. Malik Washington did replace Jalen Waddle. Wasn't able to do much with it, Ian. 88% route participation. Actually led the team. That's more than Tyreek Hill, but only a 13% target share, 5.8 fantasy points. But Malik Washington looks like the next man up behind Jalen Waddle.
Dolphins in Cleveland next week. So yeah, we're starting HN everywhere. Not worried about that. Tyreek, though, again, already been steadily going down the ranks, and there's going to be some good teams. I mean, Guillotine leagues, I'm sure have already moved on from Tyreek for the most part, but man, I'm sure there's even some rosters out there where actually might be looking at putting Tyreek on the bench in the fantasy finals. If you're lucky to make it that far, what a time to be alive. Otherwise, with the 49ers, we did have Brock Purdy go for 313 and a pair of touchdowns, one each to Deebo Samuel, and of course, Eric Sauber, because we had to get him involved as well. But did want to give Deebo some love because Lord knows he needs it. Had 5 straight games with 35 or fewer scoreless yards. Today racked up 96 yards receiving and a touchdown. Also 25 yards on the ground, breaking plenty of tackles along the way. So Dwayne, you said it, man. Second, we really just moved Deebo down the ranks. He's going to have one of these games. And I found the breaking point. I found that if you actually move him outside the top 50, that is when he goes
responds.
off. So you guys are all welcome. We got it. And it sure seemed like, man, that he had an enhanced role as a true running back with Isaac Guerrero sidelined.
Yeah, so I mean, he had an 82% route participation with 24% target share. So that was tied for first on the team with George Kittle. But you talked about it. Patrick Taylor was really the lead back today with 44% of the rushing attempts, 8 of them. But Deebo right behind him with 5 for 28%. So the 5, not crazy. Like we've seen Deebo have 5 rushing attempts in a game. But the fact that it was 28% and then maybe in a little bit of a different game script, that might have been like 8 or 9 touches out of the backfield. That's where it really gets exciting for a player like Deebo. Still felt like a little bit of a struggle to make things happen, Ian. Like he showed toughness on his runs, but I'm still not seeing the juice that we used to see from Deebo, where, man, he makes that first guy miss or just runs over someone and then he's gone. Like he has that gear where he can just take off. Still not seeing that, getting chased down for the most part, but still just a super rugged player. It's not an effort thing. Deebo is definitely giving it 110% out there, trying to give you guys everything he can. 25.1 fantasy points. I was more chicken than you. But I did move him outside the top 36. I moved him to 37. So maybe that's all he really needed, Ian. But I'm going to go with you. I'm going to say moving him outside the top 50 is what did it. So you're going to have to do it again this next week because I need another big game from Deebo, most likely next week in another fantasy playoff.
Just for you, my friend. Well, with Deebo soaking up again, more yards than usual, we unfortunately had a dud from Mr. Juwan Jennings. Caught 4 of 6 targets for 51 scoreless yards. So remember, people, only 2 weeks ago, he had 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. So the boom, potential still very much there. It's been some bad weather impacting some of these games, but really no excuses in this one other than, Dolphins do have a tough defense that has been, difficult for quarterbacks and wide receivers alike this year. So
Ian, if I told you Patrick Taylor was going to have a 79% snap share in this game, how high would you have ranked him?
79%?
Dude, I was not leaving the field, man. They're not giving anything to anybody else right now.
Probably like RB16.
I know. I would have had him as a mid-range running back too as well. So we'll see what happens. He didn't look very good, but it's a 1-game sample. Didn't look like he had very much juice out there. Just didn't work out for him. But yeah, man, nearly 80% of the snaps.
So apparently not quite the Trey Sermon line where we get Kyle Juszczyk in on the action, still very much the leading running back. So, okay, Dwayne, we got the 49ers going up against the Lions next week, who, yes, have a decimated defense at this point, but have still been pretty tough against the run. So Brock Purdy, as we've seen, still very viable, 300-plus yards, multiple touchdowns, imagining he's still going to be definitely inside the top 15 and maybe very well inside the top 12. No problems there. George Kittle just had 106 yards. He can be your overall tight end 1 for all I care. Go for it. Deebo, Jennings, Taylor. Are we actively trusting them and going with them in tough start-sit decisions.
Well, I still think that Jauan Jennings, like if we look at the last like 6 games, man, like we can't just let one dud be like, oh, this guy sucks now. I mean, you just mentioned it. Brock Purdy, we know is going to throw for the yards and the touchdowns, and most often that's going to mean Jauan Jennings is going to have a game. So I'm still going to have Jauan Jennings probably ahead of Deebo Samuel. The only thing that might tempt me to have Deebo slightly ahead is the rushing attempts that we talked about, having 28%. Who knows, though, if that really translates to all of a sudden they're in a game where they can run the ball 25 times. Does that really mean Deebo gets 10 carries? Yeah. We don't know, because sometimes these coaches really have like a touch count in mind for these players, and they're not thinking about percentages. Some are, some are not. Like, so they all do it a little bit differently. But I think Deebo's a boom bust wide receiver 3. Like, he had one good game in the last 5. Like, how can we really make him more than that?
I guess I just meant more with like Jauan Jennings. I mean, him versus guys like Adam Thielen and Keenan Allen, still giving him the benefit of the doubt, you think?
I think that's the same tier.
Yeah.
I think if we're following the process, as we say, those guys are all in the same tier.
Yeah. Okay.
They're on offense. You know, I think the 49ers still the better offense. Jauan Jennings has earned targets overall over the last 5-6 games. His routes and his target earning has been similar to those other 2 players, probably better. Like if we looked at him over a full 6 game, I mean, this dude was out here just busting off 30% target shares every single week. So I think he played through a little bit of an injury today. I saw him grab his knee at one point. So keep an eye on the injury report, but I think that's the same tier.
Definitely going to be important because Isaac Guerrero, again, at least as far as I've seen, not ruled out for the season just yet. So if he does return, certainly would be the end of Patrick Taylor RB1 season. Go through the last game on the slate. The Raiders took down the Jaguars 19-14. Raiders did cover as 2.5-point favorites. The under cashed here at 41.5. And with the Raiders winning, again, now the Giants control the chance to get that #1 overall pick. So what the Raiders did see Aiden O'Connell back out there doing his best old man quarterback impression as an actual young man, 257 passing yards, found Brock Bowers 11 times on 13 targets, 99 yards. He managed to cross the 1,000-yard mark on the season, joins Mike Ditka and Kyle Pitts as the only rookies ever to do that. So either going to be a locked-in Hall of Famer or a bust who maybe is out of the league in 5 or 6 years. Dwain, nowhere in between on that one. But again, we already knew Brock Bowers was awesome. We know Jacoby Myers is awesome, even though he only had 41 scoreless yards today. I guess the bigger question is for those of us, and yes, I am proud to say I'm in a Dynasty League final with a ton of flexes, and I started Alexander Madison today. So even if I'm the only one you're answering this question for, Dwain, what did we see from the Amir Abdullah and Alexander Madison split?
Yeah, so it was a check down day for O'Connell. All these targets were underneath to Bowers, and the other guy was Amir Abdullah with a 32% target share. I mean, so both guys got involved. Alexander Madison led the backfield. He had a 57% snap share on the way to 15.6 fantasy points. So you got a usable performance out of him. He handled half of the rushing attempts with 12. If you look at Amir Abdullah, he had 29% with 7. Now Aiden O'Connell had 7. So if you take Aiden O'Connell out, right, it's basically it's a 2-to-1 kind of thing. Alexander Madison versus Abdullah in the rushing department. And both guys were pretty close in route participation. 46% for Abdullah, 49% for Alexander Madison, even though he wasn't targeted quite as often. So Madison is the guy that I would lean to. But Amir Abdullah, obviously, in a game where you got to throw the ball, which the Raiders find themselves in quite often because they're not very good. They don't score a lot of points. They tend to trail. Amir Abdullah is still the passing down back.
At the Saints next week. So maybe it could be one of those rare games where the Raiders find a way to play with a lead. We will find out. So otherwise, the Jaguars, Mac Jones, 247 yards and a touchdown through the air, having to go to Brian Thomas Jr. on a complete and utter busted coverage. So it was good he got that, though, because he honestly dropped what would have been an 80-yard touchdown earlier in the game. That said, don't feel too sorry for your fantasy box scores because it was going to come off the board anyway on a holding penalty. And I swear, Dwain, it's a good thing BTJ got going in the fourth quarter, because I felt like every catch this dude had in the first 30 minutes of the game, the rest were just throwing a flag right after it. So maybe they're playing against BTJ in their fantasy semifinals. I got my conspiracy hat on there. But again, just such a stud, $131 and a touchdown. And again, what do you want to say? It's Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors as being, Lab McConkey deserves to be in that conversation as well. Sadly, based on what we've seen this year, Marvin Harrison Jr. does not. Very, very special, I think, class of rookie wide receivers. We got 3, Dwain, that at, again, I took some of these numbers since 2014, get an XY axis, and just look at the targets per route run, yards per route run. You can see BTJ, Lad, and Neighbors, man, the top right with a bunch of other complete studs, and a Kadarius Toney here and there as well. So not a complete given, but you asked me before, Dwayne, where are you ranking JSN ahead of next year? Where are you ranking Brian Thomas Jr., man?
Yeah, man. I mean, he's definitely an upside wide receiver too. And I haven't gone through the exercise, but he could find his way in the top 12. I mean, he had a 37% target share today. And we know we'll get Christian Kirk back next year, Evan Ingram, those sort of things. But those are two guys that, like, as much as we like them, they're solid players. Like, Brian Thomas Jr. might just be so much better than them that he just keeps on doing this, even whenever they're back in the lineup. I mean, I know if I'm Trevor Lawrence and I'm trying to finally have like a really big season, like, Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy that I want to get the ball to. We saw it again today, working the stuff underneath, getting the balls down the field. I mean, I don't know that there's a more complete rookie that can just win from anywhere, man. Like, Malik Neighbors obviously is going out here and dominating from a target share standpoint, and we know that he's playing through injuries. He's had multiple, has really bad quarterback play, but Brian Thomas Jr.'s quarterback play hasn't been good either. And now that he's in a similar situation to what Malik Neighbors has been in really all season, where he's the only game in town, man, he's doing way more than what Malik Neighbors was doing in that same sort of scenario. So if somebody wants to rank Brian Thomas Jr. ahead of Malik Neighbors, I can't really argue with that, Ian.
And again, just having watched basically every target to both guys, like, you don't see Neighbors or really anyone else for that matter creating this downfield separation the same way that BTJ has really done all season long. And as we've seen once, Ingram and Kirk have both been injured. Yeah, the dude's pretty explosive, on these shorter ADOT opportunities as well. So I'm definitely going to say top 16. Now, as we're talking about this, I'm just sure I'm going to start naming about 30 different wide receivers that I want in my top 16. So we'll have to, condense those rankings and figure things out once and for all. But regardless, man, very, very promising stuff for BTJ. Certainly standing out as one of the true late round gems from this year in fantasy. So loving him on the squad. Unfortunately, not loving the Brenton Strange experience. Got Dwain. Again, had 4 top 9 finishes and 5 starts coming in, but after 22 scoreless yards in this one, that was not the case. Did pop up with a shoulder injury this week.
Didn't play a full-time role. I think he's hurt. 38% route participation. Targets per route run was still great, 27%. So when he was out there, he was getting his targets. He just was not able to play enough. And one of those first catches, man, he just got thrown down on the sideline, right onto his back. Kind of wonder if, like, he maybe aggravated the shoulder injury there. So yeah, Brenton Strange. Think he's probably a decent player, round 2 guy. I think, was he a Nittany Lion? Yeah, I think Brenton Strange was second round pick 2 years ago. So might have something still, but obviously going to go back to behind Evan Ingram next year whenever the new season rolls around. But as far as next week goes, just got to keep an eye on the injury report. Again, earned the targets, just was not out there playing enough snaps. I do think it was injury related.
Yeah, I guess I forgot the Jaguars gave Ingram that extension. So yeah, going to be a backup tight end. Cool. Luke Farrell. Go Buckeyes, number 3 in the meantime, if you miss his time. Last thing, Dwayne, last note of our recap episodes this year. Tank Bigsby, Travis Etienne. What did we see?
We can't go out like this. You're going to have to find a better last question because it's the worst question because, honestly, I have no answer. We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. What we do know, though, is it's a split backfield that we can't really predict on a team that sucks. Yeah, so we really don't want to mess with it if we don't have to. It was Tank Bigsby today leading the way. It does feel like it's an every other week thing. It's a seesaw back and forth. So maybe that's the thing. Maybe next weekend is ETN. But even when we say that Tank Bigsby wins the day, the problem is, right, it's 10 fantasy points. So it's like, I don't even care anymore. 57% of the rushing attempts versus 43% for ETN. ETN led the team on passing downs, 45% versus 13%. But we did see the return of Dearness Johnson, who hadn't been playing, to get a pesky 20% route participation. So that's not good. Now we got a third back involved, unless there was an injury late in the game that maybe I missed. I did not see anything when I searched a few minutes ago.
ETN, again, someone who we thought finally had the pass down work, but yeah, it was actually Dearness Johnson. I believe even in the dreaded 2-minute rule, which is where we usually see them get fed those fantasy friendly checkdowns. So that sucks. It's going to be really annoying trying to project this backfield next year, and we will worry about it not now because, again, I'm with you. Even in a winnable matchup against the Titans, neither of these guys will be cracking our top 24, and honestly, even top 30 probably unlikely at this point. But I said it before, guys, this is the last recap edition. If you you guys have a week 18 fantasy championship. That is your fault. We are not going to be breaking down week 17 games going into week 18.
We still love you guys.
Still love you guys. We'll still have content on FantasyLife.com. I'm sure we'll still have our rankings up. So we're not completely leaving you barren. But come on, what are you doing? Week 18 fantasy championships. That's just ridiculous to me, Dwayne. But we did it. Good for us. Good for all of you too. You know, good for all.
Great. It was another great season in the books, Hartitz.
It was another great season. So not going anywhere. In the meantime, as Dwayne said, already got some good old plans for you guys on the Fantasy Life show throughout the rest of the way. Got some playoff action, some guillotine elimination leagues that I am very excited about as we get into the playoffs. Yeah. All that and again, so much more. So you can start off with catching myself, Paul Charchian, and Chris Allen tomorrow morning, maybe this morning if you're listening to us. Yeah, probably definitely this morning, 9 a.m. on Monday. Let's go ahead and go with that one. And then myself and Dwayne back on Tuesday with utilization and sheesh goodness. And then myself, Dwayne, and again, apparently Guillotine League finalist Matthew Friedman on Wednesday to get you guys ready for, again, championship week. So hope you guys are still alive in those fantasy leagues. And if not, you know, like Happy Gilmore was saying, you know, 365 days to get ready until the next go around. So for Dwayne, I mean, thank you. Truly thank you guys again for tuning into the Fantasy Life.